Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs will come to order. Just want to welcome everyone to the hearing. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Welcome to the first hearing of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs for the 119th Congress. It is a personal honor to serve as the chairman of this committee, and I look forward to working with Ranking Member Frost and my colleagues on this subcommittee over the course of this Congress as we tackle urgent problems facing the American people. Today's hearing topic concerns every district across the country, the state of America's energy reliability. Power demand is expected to grow dramatically, if not exponentially, in the coming years as new manufacturing facilities and data centers are built throughout the country. With the new demand comes a lot of questions. Where will this additional power come from? Are we doing enough to create more power generation and transmission? If we are not, are we setting our power grid up to crash? What will all this mean for the American people, and how can they be assured that energy bills won't continue to rise? New innovation, particularly in the field of nuclear energy, offers promising solutions, but it is often thwarted from reaching its full potential due to regulatory and permitting challenges imposed by this government. Reliable and trusted sources of power generation, such as natural gas and coal, are still fighting against regulatory obstacles created by the previous administration. Burdensome regulations have been the silent killer of economic growth and prosperity in our country and have lasting implications for U.S. industries, particularly the power sector. The Biden EPA power plant rule will, if left in place, force premature retirement of existing power plants across the country without providing a clear path forward for bringing new power generation online. Last Congress, I introduced the Reliable Grid Act of 2024 to address this issue and ensure that Americans everywhere have access to affordable, reliable energy supplies. Under the Trump administration, significant steps are already being taken to revitalize our nation's energy sector. Recent executive actions seek to expand oil and gas production, reverse previous limitations, and unleash our energy independence. These initiatives, coupled with an ongoing regulatory reforms, are to alleviate unnecessary burdens on energy development, are poised to modernize our power generation and transmission infrastructure, ensuring reliable and affordable energy supply for all Americans. Over the course of this Congress, I hope that this subcommittee can shed light on where reforms are needed and bring forth practical and hopeful bipartisan solutions to better serve the American people. I look forward to our conversation here today, and with that, I yield to Ranking Member Frost for his opening statement. Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Mr. Epstein, in my home state of Missouri, we rely predominantly on coal for electricity generation. The previous administration's proposed regulation on power plants would lead to the premature closure of fossil fuel-fired power plants across the country, including Missouri. And I'll tell you, I had a sobering moment during Winter Storm Uri, when we had 2 weeks of negative, double-digit temperature, and we were hearing about reliability problems. They were warning of brownouts. They were warning that they may have to shut down power, and the heating of our own personal home was barely keeping up. And I'll tell you, looking out the window of my backyard and seeing that we had a coal-fired power plant that was going, I was thankful to God that we had that at that time. Unfortunately, some people died in Winter Storm Uri, 150 people. So this is very sobering. It's very real. My question is, how should Congress and the new Trump administration address misguided regulations to ensure that Americans in every district have access to affordable, reliable electricity supplies and never face having to freeze to death in modern America?
I mean, first of all, they really, and in particular, let's focus on EPA, they really need to recognize what you're saying, which is that a reliable grid is an existential thing for human life including human health. I think, we heard an example about like, oh, what if you put a natural gas plant and it's going to harm people's health? That's pseudoscience. Natural gas burns incredibly cleanly. But what does harm people's health is not having a reliable natural gas plant. Imagine not having reliable natural gas in Florida, not having coal in Missouri. Like these, cold is the #1 cause of climate-related death, despite people are afraid of warming. Like the EPA, when it's doing cost-benefit analyses, which it needs to do more of and Congress should make it do more of, it needs to factor in the reliability of the grid as a crucial factor. And one thing I know you and I have talked about is there should just be a pause on any kind of new action that potentially threatens the reliability of the grid until the electricity crisis is resolved, because the electricity crisis is a health crisis that far dwarfs any negative side effects of fossil fuels.
And with new power demands coming, as you mentioned the AI data centers and all of that, what can we do now to prepare and to ramp up quickly?
I mean, I was just sighing because I'm like, listen to people like me 10 years ago. I mean, it's annoying because it was so obvious that shutting down reliable power plants in a world that well could need more reliable electricity was just a disaster. So I think what you need to look at is what are the near-term things you can do. I think the most near-term thing you can do, which I didn't cover in my testimony, is you want to see how do we increase the already existing capacity of coal plants and natural gas plants, which particularly with the coal plants is being drastically underutilized due to a lot of irrational emissions regulations. Like coal and gas have real capacity, solar and wind have fake capacity. It's not a capacity if you can go to near zero at any given time when the weather changes. So you need to increase the utilization of our real capacity, and happy to share more details on how to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Gunasekara, as the chief, the former chief of staff at EPA, you had a unique perspective on how federal agencies work or do not work. When thinking about the role of the federal government and how it has in encouraging economic growth, how do the regulations stand in the way of that economic growth?
Yeah, I think what we saw in the last administration was putting their thumb on the scale against traditional energy resources, coal, oil, and natural gas that, again, provide the bulk of our daily energy needs and then also provide that important baseload generation that I referenced earlier. When you have overregulation, it increased costs, it increased litigation opportunities, and that equates to uncertainty throughout various industries that are necessary for us to live out our daily modern life. So really paring back various regulations that have either skewed from EPA's actual mission, which is to protect the environment, improve efficiencies, not put certain businesses out of business, to get away from that, to comport with the law and ensure that there's stability and certainty going forward for those that want to make the investments we need to meet this future growth in energy demand.
Thank you. And Mr. Hergott, what recommendations do you have to address the problems in the current permitting system, and what's at stake if we do not?
So as an example, as much as the IRA is touted as a marquee accomplishment of the last administration, there were 195 new regulations, 45 gigs of wind, solar, transmission, and others that would have provided for the green energy revolution are either abandoned or will never get built. So the reality is, when capital is put at risk, we remove the obstacles and build it well within a year. We can do that. Countries far greener than ours in Europe do it in half the time that we do it, without any compromises to environmental or social or cultural protections. We are in the modern age. We are relying on 50-year-old rules on how we build infrastructure, and if we continue on this pathway of not realizing that there is a balance between human activity and the natural environment. If you want a car, you're going to need a road. If you want to turn on your lights, you're going to need a transmission line. If you're not going to build the renewable energy, you need to rely on the other stuff. At some point, electricity is not a public good. At some point, it has to get built. And the government is not going to build it. The private sector is. We got to remove the hurdles. And we also need to look at opportunities to potentially outsource engineering and architects firms to address the significant backload of projects that are moving through the system with a federal workforce that is not capable to deal with the complexity of the projects of today.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much for our expert witnesses for coming today. I believe that we had a robust debate on policy, and I'm glad that we stuck to the debate. This hearing has helped identify tangible ways in which Congress and the Trump administration can promote strong, reliable, and inexpensive energy for the American people. The previous administration left the American people on the edge of an energy cliff, and power shortfalls are a very real possibility if we do not address the many issues impacting our power generation and electric grid. In 2023, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation's annual risk assessment included energy policy as one of the leading threats to electric reliability for the first time ever. The 2024 assessment found that many regions of the country had a likelihood of experiencing resource adequacy shortfalls in the coming years. This is not something to take lightly, and there are a growing number of threats that need to be tackled quickly in the coming years. Just yesterday, Chile experienced a massive power blackout due to a transmission line failure, leaving millions of its citizens in the dark and disrupting critical infrastructure and functions for daily life. Events of this size and scale are alarming because they remind us that this can happen anywhere. Grid operators have sounded the alarms for years of what's to come, and if we don't address the challenges impacting both power generation and our aging transmission infrastructure, we already know what works, and overreaching government must get out of the way when it comes to energy policy and regulations. For far too long, red tape and permitting hurdles have strangled the American energy sector and the infrastructure that supports this industry. The Trump administration understands the importance of letting the private sector lead and has already begun removing some of the unnecessary barriers to unleash new investment. Power demand is increasing as the AI race and AI dominance spawns new demand for data centers across the country. The need for cheap, reliable energy will only grow. We can match that need and provide even more power generation through reforming regulations for the power sector, including nuclear power, which is one of the cleanest forms of power available. Congress and the new administration can take advantage of the abundant resources our nation possesses, utilizing reliable fuel sources to keep the lights on while we develop new innovative solutions that we can rely on in the future. And once again, I want to thank each and every one of our witnesses for being here today, for their insights and important issues. And with that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials to this and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there is no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.